Welcome to the Rupa Subramanya Show, everybody. I'm your host, Rupa Subramanya. Today, I'm going to be speaking to Christine Anderson. She is a member of the European Parliament, a body that is part of the European Union. She belongs to the Alternative for Germany, or the AFD party. In Germany, the AFD is seen by many in the political mainstream, both the traditional right and the traditional left, as being beyond the pale because of their strong position on immigration and asylum seekers and their position on radical Islam. They are also seen in some quarters as being anti-Semitic. Their views on immigration, for example, are not any more controversial than, say, the more right-wing elements of the Conservative Party here in Canada or the PPC in Canada. However, given Germany's unique history, the period of Nazi rule and the cataclysm of the Holocaust, many Germans feel very uneasy about accepting the AFD into the mainstream. But things are starting to change. Public opinion is changing. The AFD is now polling second nationally after the Christian Democratic Union. This is the mainstream center-right party. And it's far ahead of the members of the current ruling coalition, the Social Democrats, the Free Democrats, and the Greens. In some provinces of the former East Germany, the AFD is actually leading in the polls. Now, when Christine Anderson visited Canada this past winter, back in February, the reaction to her visit by members of the mainstream left was pretty predictable. There was a complete meltdown that Christine Anderson of the AFD, or a member of the AFD, was visiting Canada. But it also put the Conservative Party in a quandary. Party leader Pierre Poilievre joined Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in condemning her and her visit. However, some Tory MPs, including Leslyn Lewis and Dean Allison, met with Christine during her Canadian tour. Now, very few Canadians have had a chance to hear from Christine directly. Very few Canadians even know anything about the AFD and what they stand for, because a lot of this gets caught up in a social media frenzy. So today I have the opportunity to speak to Christine directly about her views about what the AFD stands for and what the AFD's rising popularity means for Germany and for the world. Welcome to the show, Christine. It's great to have you on my show, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I want to start by asking you about your visit to Canada this past February. There was a lot of outrage and indignation by many in the mainstream, and also to some extent people from the Conservative Party. Just tell me what brought you to Canada and what you made of the reaction to your visit.
Well, the reason I came to Canada is I really wanted to meet the Freedom Truckers, which I consider to be the bravest people in the world. Once they started protesting and those rigs were rolling, I mean, that sent a light throughout the entire world and inspired so many others. And plus, it broke the sense people were given, and that is kind of part of the game plan to insinuate that you're all isolated, you're all on your own with this, and if you consider government measures to be outrageous, you are completely alone and isolated with this. And once the Freedom Convoy started, people realized, probably many of them for the first time, hey, we're not alone in this. There's others that also do not consider the measures to be right. So I wanted to meet the people, and I did. I had a great time, and they really welcomed me in a way that I would have never thought possible. It was really warm-hearted. I mean, seriously, I got the impression, gosh, they really love me. So what happened then when I got pretty much thrown under the bus, that was just, a little a little nuisance to deal with. Really didn't bother me that much because I am used to stuff like that. So, and I always say, that is not my problem. That is their problem. And I know what I stand for, and no one gets to define me. And so let them speak. People will always talk, And so, yeah, I had a really fantastic time.
Yeah. So one of the things that makes you controversial is not necessarily your support for the truckers, although that is also controversial here in Canada for all of us who.
Controversial. I mean, people standing up for freedom, democracy, and the rule of law should never be controversial, especially not in a democracy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's exactly right. But many of us who stand up for those things are smeared in many different ways. And so that itself is controversial. But one of the things that makes you controversial, I hate to use that word because I've been described as controversial, is that you belong to the AFD. Tell me why is the AFD controversial? What makes it controversial? It's seen as beyond the pale, even in Germany, by the mainstream political establishment, both the traditional left and the traditional right.
Well, it's what I just said. My party, AFD, we stand up for freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, and that makes us controversial. Of course, we aren't not controversial by no stretch of the imagination, but we are perceived as a threat to mainstream politics, the politically desired narrative. So that's actually why they label us controversial, or smear us with other kind of named right-wing extremists, Nazis. I mean, the whole shebang. It's all in there: racist, homophobes, the entire thing. So yeah, that's when you look at my party. Actually, look at our program. It reads exactly what you could have read in the party programs of the former Conservative Party, the Christian Democrats, and the former Liberal Party, the FDP, like 15, 20 years ago. It's exactly the same thing, but they have made a shift, from being conservative and being liberal to the left, and they continue to shift to the left, even adopt now the green ideology and all of that nonsense. So yeah, we are actually the only party in Germany that still lives by democratic standards, meaning freedom, democracy, rule of law, division of power, the one man, one vote rule, and all of that. We advocate for having, what do you call it? I'm missing the word now. Where you ask the entire people on a particular issue, a referendum. So we stand for all of these things. We actually want the people to be in charge and be in power, and not these despicable, globalists or the puppets of these despicable globalists. So that's why we get attacked.
But there have been some statements made by leaders of the AFD in the past that have been interpreted as being anti-Semitic or anti-Muslim, for that matter. I want you to help us understand, what exactly were those? What was that about? Did the world get it wrong? Did everybody interpret these things incorrectly? What is going on here?
Okay, well, the operative word here being interpreted,
Okay.
So if you state, which should be, a matter of course, to have state borders and to control your borders, you're perceived as being racist,
Mm-hmm.
So that's their interpretation. But I mean, seriously, think about this. Probably everyone in the United States and Canada, everywhere, is locking their front door to their house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would they do that? Well, so they can be safe within their own home. That's the purpose. No one in their right mind would, just leave the door wide open, invite just about anyone in, and just then realize, gosh, my family is no longer safe in my house, and would then go about installing video surveillance in the entire house. No, they would kick them all out and they would lock up their door. So why should that not hold true for a country? Because that's the purpose of a country, and that's how it developed. First, you had, very small settlements, but they had some kind of a protective border around it, a fence, something, so people inside would be safe. So then it became villages, then cities, but they all had a protective border around it. And once we grew, all of these settlements grew into nations. Yeah, you had a state border. For what purpose? Because the people inside needed to be safe, because you do not know who is coming in. And if you let anyone in, then you are no longer safe, which then, and we're seeing that in Germany now, but once you tear down the outer borders, like let's say the nation's border or the city border, you will have to erect little borders within that space to be once again safe. And that is ridiculous. So just wanting to enforce border patrols and border controls and not just let anyone in, that gets you labeled a racist, a xenophobe, and the whole shebang.
I mean, there is a movement within the AFD. There is a wing of the AFD that wants to interpret, Germany's Nazi past. There are elements in the party that are trying to do that. What is your take on that? As in, should Germany continue to atone for its Nazi past? I think that's one thing that some members of the AFD are trying to say. Look, how long are we going to keep atoning for this? What is your view on that?
Okay, so first of all, if you say there is a few people within the AFD that have a different viewpoint on that, you will have to give me some names, because I don't know a single person within my party who ever wants to go back to these times. On the contrary, we do not want ever to go back there. On top of all of that, and that's really a problem, especially in the last 3 years, it had become quite apparent. If you were to point out the parallels of what the Nazis did back then, I mean, Nazi Germany did not start out by rounding up people and transporting them off to camps. That was not the beginning. That was the end point of it all. So, but it started. There were little incremental steps, one step at a time, to get people used to, a certain way of doing things. So they started out by saying, well, the Jews can no longer sit on certain benches in a park. Well, yeah, what's the big deal, right? You can kind of rationalize that even. Oh, there's other benches. Let them sit on them. Well, yeah, and then those were taken away. Then the next step, and so people got used to, doing certain. Well, then the next step came. So if we were to point out that the mechanisms that were implemented and that took place back then, the steps that the Nazis actually took back then, if you were to point out parallels to how things are nowadays, you automatically get accused of trivializing the Holocaust. It is this insane, and trivializing, glorifying the Holocaust is a crime under the German Penal Code. So, but this is really the problem. How are we supposed to live up to our promise, never again, if you have no idea how it started? How are you supposed to fight the beginnings if you are no longer allowed to talk about how it got started back then? That's really, and for the life of me, I cannot understand. So how will the next generation be able to continue to live up to that promise if I can't tell them how it happened back then? And the thing is this, another thing, someone calling me a Nazi, at what conclusion will a young person arrive at? They look at me and say, well, she's a Nazi? they must obviously conclude, well, if she's a Nazi, then the Nazis could not have been that bad now, could they?
Mm.
Considering the atrocities that the Nazis inflicted on mankind, and to compare me to that, that is trivializing the Holocaust, and that is trivializing the Nazis. But they don't get that. They are so that they just don't get it.
Yeah, that's a very good point that you make. In fact, that's what we're doing. We're actually trivializing these atrocities by calling everybody that you disagree with as a Nazi. But it's good to have your views on the record, Christine. So that's very important. That
to be clear on that, I absolutely detest the Nazis, and I really took a deep dive into how it was possible, because that's just mind-blowing. When you look back at Germany in the 20s and the 30s, we were a highly sophisticated, highly educated nation. I mean, we were, leading in the science. German was the international scientific language. I mean, there are numerous inventions came out of Germany, poems, music. I mean, seriously, we were a highly sophisticated, educated, and civilized country, society. And yet it was possible to have all of these atrocities going on in Germany. And that really is mind-blowing. So how was that possible? So I took a really deep dive into, the incremental steps, the psychology involved, and all of that. So, and like I said, people really need to understand how it happened back then. And only then will they be able to recognize that it can happen anywhere, any place, again. And in order to stop that, you need to know. You need to know how it was possible.
Yeah. How diverse is the support for the AFD in Germany? As in, like, is it like, do you have support from from Muslims? Do you have support from minority communities? Just out of curiosity, I want to know how diverse the support for the AFD is.
Well, actually, we are a rather diverse party. I mean, one of the board president, she's gay, right? So, and that's all interesting though. Her sexual orientation, that never played a part within our party. She never had to answer questions in terms of that within our party. So it was like, we just kind of took note, and that was it, right? Yeah. Once she got elected, or once she became, she ran for the Bundestag in 2017, and she was one of the top rankings. And all she had to do all day long was answering questions from mainstream media. How come you're gay and you're in this party? So they made an issue out of it, So but that was just a side note. But yeah, there is. We have lots of members within our party. They have a migration background. They come from other countries. Yeah, we even have Muslims in our party. That is not the issue at all. When it comes to that, my issue actually is with Islam. I don't have an issue with Muslims. I have an issue with Islam, which I consider to be an ideology.
Yeah, that's. I read a news story from a few years ago, and I don't know if this is still the case. Apparently, there were Jewish members of the AFD. Is that still the case, or do you still have Jewish members of the AFD?
Of course, we even have an organization within our party. It's called Jews in the AFD. Yeah, of course we do.
Yeah, the reason I ask this is that a lot of parties that are smeared as far right tend to draw support from groups that are traditionally seen as voting for mainstream political parties. But increasingly, even here in Canada, you're starting to see that that it's actually a diverse group of people that end up supporting these parties, and so I find that fascinating as as an observer. But I want to ask you about what explains. Even though the mainstream political establishment in Germany wants to shun the AFD, but the AFD has had a dramatic rise in recent months, and how do you explain that?
Well, very simple. Everything we've been saying for 10 years, my party was founded 10 years ago, and everything we have been saying for 10 years turned out to be true. And people are now realizing that. So, I mean, okay, we were labeled as Nazis, right-wing extremists, and all of that. And that was to get people not to listen to us, not to even deal with that, us not to even, consider reading our party program, which is out in the open. Anyone can read it, but most people just don't. They turn on their television set, and their television set tells them AFD is a Nazi party, and that's it, right? So they don't think for themselves, and they don't do their own research. But like I said, we've been around for 10 years, and everything we've been saying and everything we've been stigmatized for and labeled for and smeared for, turns out now it was all true. Everything we were saying, and people are realizing that, and they're, quite frankly, they're just fed up with being told lies. And whatever party happens to be in the opposition of the mainstream media parties, once they're in opposition, they kind of say what the people would like to hear and what people would actually want. So they get elected, they're back in government, and then guess what? They're doing it all over again. So, and hopefully people will now realize it's just a matter of, in the opposition, they will tell you whatever they want, and whatever they think that you want to hear, to just then do the exact opposite once again in government.
Can you explain to us briefly what are the main policy differences between the AFD and the mainstream political parties, and if you think this is one of the reasons why you guys are surging in the polls?
Well, first of all, we do want nation borders, but the people within Germany need to be safe. Secondly, national sovereignty, a very big issue. Then thirdly, this whole climate madness, which is really just insane ideology. So we would rather go back to nuclear power, which is the cleanest power, actually, if you think about it, right? So we just want people to afford energy, food, housing, and do all of that, instead of artificially increasing it, because we have to adhere to some kind of a sick ideology, right? So that would be an issue. I mean, it's pretty much, we are advocating for exactly what the conservatives and the Liberal Party advocated for, like I said, 15, 20 years ago. So just common sense, policy, common sense politics, and none of that bogus ideological idiocy. I mean, you see it just about everywhere.
Yeah, I would say that the AFD was probably far ahead of the curve in taking a position on these issues. What was once seen as extreme actually is now becoming rather mainstream. We
are sitting on the government bench. That's where the extremists are.
Yeah, I mean, we see that the Social Democrats in Denmark, for example, made it part of their successful re-election campaign. In the U.S. and Canada, mainstream conservative parties are now embracing, even the liberals. There's talk within liberal segments here that, hey, wait a minute, our very lenient immigration policy, it's not working for us, and maybe we need to put a break on it. So even parties on the left, even commentators on the left, are being forced to reconsider their support for high levels of immigration and asylum. And there's been, of course, they're reacting to a backlash from within the local population. So in a sense, it's kind of ironic. Like, the AFD was seen as crazy for stating these positions, but everybody is now saying the same thing now. How do you see this playing out from your perch? Like, you've been at this for like 10 years or more, being with the AFD. How do you see the future of conservative politics in Europe and more generally in the West shaping in light of everything?
Well, you already mentioned the Social Democrats in Sweden. I think
in Denmark.
Denmark, sorry, Denmark,
Yeah.
but even Sweden, they're starting now kind of too. So I mean, they have a huge problem with migrants there, because they just let anyone in and whatever. So yeah. So, but the thing is this, for Germany, gosh, I really have a hard time considering or even thinking about that our mainstream parties, like the established or old parties, as I would call them, that they would ever reconsider. All they are doing is, like I said, if they want to get reelected, right, they start talking about, oh yeah, well, there is lots of so-called refugees that really have no right to be here, and so they need to go back home. But it's just talk. It's always just talk, right? They never actually do any of what they said they were going to do. So I have a hard time believing that the established parties in Germany would actually reconsider. In other countries, yeah, it might happen here and there. But that's what the EU is for, right? We have this EU Commission, and Ursula von der Leyen, running it. Trust me, she'll make sure that other European countries do not, reconsider and possibly do something else. So they have all kinds of instruments at their disposal. There is the so-called rule of law mechanism, which is applied when a country steps out of line, and they define what is stepping out of line, what that constitutes. So if a country does anything that the woke EU does not approve of or does not appreciate, they'll get slapped with a rule of law mechanism, meaning they will cut their funds, right? So,
Yeah.
And that particularly holds true for, or is very effective with the Eastern European countries, because they have a completely, I mean, they have a different past. And they remember what it was like to live under totalitarian rule by the Soviets. It hasn't been that long ago that they have overcome that. And they recognize the signs. They know exactly what's coming because they've been there. They've done that. So if they were to emphasize national sovereignty or their border control or stuff like that, they'll get slapped with that mechanism, meaning they will cut their funds. It works. It works like a charm.
Yeah. What is the AFD's position on some foreign policy issues, like in the current conflict, but what's happening in the Middle East, Israel and Hamas? Where does the AFD stand on that?
Actually, my party really hasn't come up with a position on that yet. And thing is simply this: I don't know what's going on there. I really don't. I mean, you get propaganda from this side, you get propaganda from the other side. I don't know what the hell is going on there. I really don't. The thing is, though, I mean, like I said, I really have an issue with Islam because I believe it to be, a terrible ideology, which is actually capable of bringing out the worst in people. So on the other hand, it's like Israel is a highly sophisticated, probably the country in the world with the most sophisticated surveillance apparatus. And they're telling us they didn't know that Hamas was about to hit them. So that's, like I said, I don't know. But Hamas just, running wild and kidnapping people, murdering them, beheading them in front of their family, taking babies, and, all of this. I mean, that's an atrocity, an absolute atrocity. And yes, Israel has every right to protect its people. Like I said, my party stands for border control and protecting the citizens. So Israel has absolutely the right to do that. But like I said, I don't really know what's going on down there. And it's sad to say, but you don't really know what's going on anymore in the world, because it could be true, it couldn't be true, whatever you're told, propaganda here, propaganda there,
Mm-hmm.
So our party really hasn't arrived at a unanimous opinion on that. Other than saying that yes, Israel absolutely has the right to defend itself. But there's another issue that that was brought about. Now all of a sudden, get this, now all of a sudden, our politicians, the mainstream politicians, realize that we have imported anti-Semitism. Seriously? What? We imported anti-Semitism? You're kidding. How could that have been? No, that's not possible. So that's another issue. We have been saying for 10 years, if you import just about anyone of the Islam faith, yeah, you import anti-Semitism. Guess what? It's true. Turned out to be true.
Yeah, I want to point to your intervention in the European Parliament from a few years ago, I believe, and you did raise your concerns about anti-Semitism from certain Muslim quarters in Germany. And, I did come across that a few months ago. So I'd like to point that to our...
not just in Germany, by the way. These, in support of Hamas, these demonstration protests, Jewish flags being burned and all of that. I mean, that was massive. That was really massive. I see, women running around and tearing down the missing leaflets from their loved ones, and they just go down and tear it down. I mean, that's terrible. And that has been known these past few weeks, hasn't it? Yeah, we have a problem with anti-Semitism once again.
Yeah, no, I certainly see that even here in Canada. I just want to ask you, at some point, given just how popular the AFD is getting in Germany, do you see it governing any of the provinces in Germany or the federal level?
Oh yeah, eventually. I mean, every party eventually wants to be part of government, right? The time frame on that, I have no idea. I mean, they insist on holding up that so-called firewall. So, and that's actually been going on for years now. Whenever AFD comes up and whatever parliament comes up with an initiative, a legislation or whatever, it never gets voted for, no matter how sensible it is. It never gets voted for, just to then, like, a few months down the road, another party comes up with the exact same idea. And all of a sudden, So we're kind of, we are determining policy already, just not directly, rather indirectly, by other parties just picking up our good ideas and passing them off as their own. But that's just the way it works right now. But eventually, there isn't going to be a way around to us anymore, because they cannot continue upholding that firewall. So they won't work together with us. Like I said, no matter how sensible our suggestions may be. But the voter is recognizing that, the citizens are realizing what's going on. And there is going to be a point in time when, the Christian Democrats or the Liberal Party may actually need us to be able to form a government. Because what's happening now is the only government that is possible is, in any combination of the established parties. So the Christian Democrats, like I said, the former conservative party in this country, they form a government with the Greens, for God's sakes, And before the election, so they say they will not exclude working together with any of the established parties. The only ones they completely ignore and exclude is the AFD. But the voter will punish them for that sooner or later.
I want to go back to what you said earlier, and this will be my final question for you, because I know you're a very busy person. You spoke about the truckers' protest, and I've seen your comments on the truckers' protest from last year. What is it about that protest that resonated with you, and how did the average German view the truckers' protest in Canada?
Okay. So in Germany, the protest started, I would say, in August of 20. There were some pretty big, huge protests in Berlin. And the way the authorities dealt with that was rather flabbergasting, water cannons, and, fenced them in, and, the whole shebang. It was pretty much, bashing down on that protest. So, and it was just, everywhere in the world, there were people that did not, want to live under, let's call it a totalitarian rule, because that's the way we're headed. But they were all alone, right? So, and once I heard that in Canada, there were truckers that, were just fed up and got on their rig and started rolling towards Ottawa, and how it grew by day. And it was like, oh my God, finally someone is doing something, right? And that was that was my cue, I need to support this. I need to speak out for these people because they're doing the right thing. Because I will never tire to say what they did for all of the people around the globe. I mean, it's God, unparalleled, and they will, I've said that before, I'll say it again, they will go down in history as probably the most important protest movement ever. So that was just like, finally someone is doing something. And it started pretty much, in the beginning it was okay, they got a lot of support from the people, and but then the Canadian government really started bashing down on them, right? And it was like, and now I really need to support them, so they will have at least someone, to kind of let them know you are doing the right thing and I'm with you on this.
Yeah, I'm going to squeeze in one question. We have to kind of end perhaps on a humorous note here, but you're being called a Nazi and every name in the book, but mostly Nazi. But then in Canada a few weeks ago or last month, there was a literal Nazi in Parliament who got a standing ovation. What are you thinking at this point? You're like, I come to Canada and everybody's calling me a Nazi, but here you have a Nazi who's being applauded and praised. And so
I'm actually still laughing. I'm still laughing. No, when I heard about that, I was like, oh my God. And I was beside myself. I was laughing so hard. And I remember I read on Twitter, and someone asked, or someone commented, I'm dying to hear what Christine Anderson has to say about that. And I just responded, can't comment. I'm still on the floor rolling and laughing out loud. But I mean, hilarious, isn't it though? Seriously. I mean, here you have three members of parliament that meet, with another member of another parliament from overseas, which is not unusual. I mean, you meet up with fellow parliamentarians in other countries. Of course you do. And I'm being labeled a Nazi, and the three that had lunch with me were all Nazis too. Now I got mentioned in Canadian Parliament, being vile and racist, and what have you not. And I mean, the biggest nightmare in all of Canada, and whatever. And here he is, a real life Nazi, being applauded and hailed and recognized. I was like, seriously, you guys are so ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. And I had a ball with this. Really, I could not stop laughing for a very long time.
Well, yeah, Canada is a barrel of laughs these days. So certainly, we're like the butt of everybody's jokes, and unfortunately, but not in a good way. But at least we're a source of humor in these troubling times, I think.
Yeah. If I had no humor, oh my God, I could not do this job, to tell you the truth. Yeah.
Yeah. But
if you elect a guy like Justin Trudeau to be your prime minister, you shouldn't be surprised to be the laughing stock of the world. Seriously.
Unfortunately, yes. But Christine, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for setting the record straight regarding your own views and the views of the AFD to some extent. And I think this was an important conversation. And I hope to continue it at some point in the future as the AFD perhaps becomes more mainstream or whatever happens down the line.
Yes, I will do that, and I can promise you that I will continue to fight, no matter what.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Christine.
Thank you so much.